You know that feeling when you're scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m., seeing everyone's highlight reels, their vacations, their new cars, their seemingly perfect lives, and you're sitting there thinking, I work just as hard as they do. Why am I still broke? And then you check your bank account and feel that little spike of anxiety because even though you're working 50, 60 hours a week, somehow there's never enough left over at the end of the month. And the worst part? You can't even remember where it all went. Sound familiar? Well, what if I told you that working harder isn't actually the solution to building wealth? In fact, for most people, it's the exact thing keeping them broke. My name's Miko, and I spend way too much time thinking about why some people build serious wealth while working reasonable hours and maintaining actual lives, while other people grind themselves into exhaustion and have nothing to show for it. If you're someone who's tired of feeling like you're running on a hamster wheel, working harder and harder but never actually getting ahead, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Before we get into the systems that actually work, let me ask you something that's going to sound kind of confrontational. When's the last time you actually sat down and calculated your hourly rate for all the extra work you're doing? Like, really calculated it. Let's say you're salaried at $60,000 a year. That's about $28 an hour for a standard 40-hour week. But most salaried people I know aren't working 40 hours. They're working 50, 55, sometimes 60 hours a week. Suddenly, that $60,000 salary is actually paying you $23 an hour, or $20, or less. You're literally working for a pay cut that you're giving yourself. And here's the crazy part. Most people's solution to not having enough money is to work even more hours, pick up a side hustle, work weekends, sacrifice time with their families, their hobbies, their mental health. And yeah, you might make an extra $500 or $1,000 a month doing that, but at what cost? Here's what most people don't realize. The math of trading time for money is fundamentally broken. There are only 168 hours in a week. Even if you worked every single hour, never slept, never ate, never did anything else, you'd still hit a ceiling on how much money you could make. And obviously that's not sustainable. You'd literally die. So if working harder and longer has a built-in ceiling and it's destroying your quality of life in the process, why is that everyone's default strategy for building wealth? The answer is because we've been sold a lie. We've been told that wealth is something you grind for, that rich people got rich because they outworked everyone else, that if you're not willing to sacrifice everything, you don't deserve financial success. But here's the truth that completely changed how I think about money. The people who build real wealth, who reach actual financial independence, aren't working harder than you. They're working smarter. And more importantly, they've built systems that generate wealth while they're sleeping, while they're on vacation, while they're spending time with their kids. That's the entire game right there. It's not about maximizing your hours worked, it's about maximizing the effectiveness of every dollar you earn. Let me give you a concrete example that illustrates this perfectly. I have two friends, we'll call them Alex and Jamie. Both started working at age 25, making about $55,000 a year. Alex took the traditional approach, worked really hard, got promoted a few times, started making $75,000 by age 30. Kept grinding, picked up freelance work on the side, worked weekends, the whole hustle culture playbook. By age 35, Alex was making about $95,000 a year between the main job and side hustles. But here's the thing, Alex was exhausted, burned out, relationships suffering, health declining from the stress. Jamie took a completely different approach. Same starting salary of $55,000, but instead of focusing on working more hours, Jamie focused on building systems, automated savings the day the paycheck hit, invested consistently in index funds, lived on less than was earned, but not in a depriving way. By age 35, Jamie was still making about $70,000 from the day job, but here's where it gets interesting. Jamie's investments had grown to about $180,000. At a conservative 7% return, that's generating roughly $12,600 per year passively. That's equivalent to getting a $12,600 raise without working a single extra hour. So who's actually wealthier? Alex, grinding 60 hours a week to make $95,000, or Jamie, working 40 hours a week, making $70,000 from the job, plus $12,600 passively, with $180,000 in the bank? The answer is obvious, but here's what makes this even more interesting. Fast forward to age 45, Alex is now making $120,000, still working 60-hour weeks, still burned out. Jamie is making $85,000 from work, but the investment portfolio has grown to about $520,000. That's generating roughly $36,400 per year passively. Jamie's total income is now $121,400, basically the same as Alex, but Jamie's working 40 hours a week and has over $500,000 in assets. This is the power of systems over grinding, and this is what we're going to build for you today. Now, before you start thinking, yeah, but I don't have money to invest. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. This doesn't apply to me. Let me stop you right there, because that mindset is exactly what keeps people broke. Here's the psychological trap that most people fall into. They wait until they have extra money to start saving or investing. But here's the thing about money. It expands to fill the space you give it. If you make $50,000 and don't save anything, then you get a raise to $60,000, you won't suddenly start saving, you'll just spend $60,000. Then you get another raise to $70,000, and guess what? You'll spend $70,000. I see this constantly with people who make six figures and somehow still live paycheck to paycheck. It's not about how much you make, it's about the systems you build. So here's the first fundamental shift you need to make. Stop thinking about saving as something you do with leftover money. Start thinking about saving as something you do first, before you see the money at all. This is called paying yourself first, and it's the single most important concept in personal finance. The idea is simple. The moment your paycheck hits your account, before you pay rent, before you buy groceries, before you do anything else, a portion of that money automatically goes to savings and investments. Now, you might be thinking, but Miko, I have bills to pay. I can't just not pay my rent. And you're right, but here's what I'm actually saying. If you can currently afford to live on your entire paycheck, you can afford to live on 90% of your paycheck, or 85%, or 80%. Let me prove it to you with some math. Let's say you make $4,000 a month after taxes. Right now, you're probably spending close to $4,000 a month, maybe even a little more on credit cards. But what if starting next month, only $3,600 hit your checking account? What if $400 automatically went to a savings account you couldn't easily access? Would you suddenly become homeless? Would you starve? Of course not. You'd adjust. You'd find ways to spend $3,600 instead of $4,000. Maybe you'd eat out one less time per week. Maybe you'd find a slightly cheaper gym. Maybe you'd actually cancel that streaming service you haven't used in 6 months. The beautiful thing about automation is you adjust to what you have. If you never see that $400, you never miss it. But if that $400 sits in your checking account, there's a 99% chance you'll spend it on something you won't even remember next month. And here's where the magic happens. That $400 per month is $4,800 per year. After 5 years, that's $24,000 in pure savings, plus whatever interest or investment returns you've earned. After 10 years, you've got nearly $50,000, again, plus returns. And you did this without making a single sacrifice that actually affected your quality of life. This is what I mean by systems over grinding. You're not working extra hours, you're not depriving yourself, you're just setting up a system that works automatically while you live your life. Now, here's where most personal finance advice goes completely wrong. They tell you to automate your savings and then they stop there. But automation alone isn't enough, because if you're automating $400 a month into a savings account earning 0.5% interest, you're barely keeping up with inflation. Your money is actually losing value.
This is where we need to talk about investing. And I know the stock market sounds scary, it sounds complicated, it sounds like something only Wall Street bros with finance degrees understand. But here's the reality. Investing in index funds is actually simpler and less risky than trying to pick individual stocks. Let me explain this in a way that actually makes sense. When you invest in an index fund, you're essentially buying a tiny piece of every major company in the market. The S&P 500, for example, includes companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, basically the 500 largest companies in America. When you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you own a little piece of all of them. And here's the thing that most people don't realize. Over long periods, the stock market has averaged about 10% annual returns. Some years it's up 20%, some years it's down 10%, but over decades it averages around 10%. And because you own the entire market through an index fund, you're not betting on one company succeeding. You're betting that the American economy as a whole will continue to grow, which historically it has. Let's go back to that $400 per month we were saving. If you just kept it in a savings account earning 0.5% interest, after 30 years you'd have about $150,000. That's your $400 times 12 months times 30 years, plus a tiny bit of interest. But if you invested that same $400 per month in an index fund, averaging 10% annual returns, after 30 years you'd have over $900,000. The same amount of money, the same amount of effort, just invested instead of saved. That's the power of compound interest. And this is why starting early is so absurdly important, because compound interest isn't linear, it's exponential. Your money doesn't just grow, it grows on the growth. Here's a comparison that should light a fire under you. If you start investing $400 a month at age 25, by age 65 you'll have about $2.1 million, assuming 10% returns. But if you wait until age 35 to start that same $400 per month investment, by age 65 you'll have about $800,000. That 10-year delay costs you over $1 million. Let me say that again. Waiting 10 years to start investing costs you over $1 million. That's not because you're investing less money, you're actually investing roughly the same total amount. It's purely because you lost 10 years of compound growth. This is where it gets really interesting. Most people think the hard part about investing is picking the right stocks, or timing the market, or figuring out some complex strategy. But study after study shows that the vast majority of professional fund managers, people who do this for a living, underperform simple index fund investing over long periods. Warren Buffett, literally one of the greatest investors of all time, has said repeatedly that most people should just invest in low-cost index funds. He's even bet $1 million that an index fund would outperform hedge fund managers over a 10-year period, and he won. So here's what this means for you. You don't need to be smart about picking stocks. You don't need to watch CNBC every day. You don't need to understand price-to-earnings ratios or any of that stuff. You just need to do 3 things. Buy index funds, do it consistently every month, and don't touch it for decades. That's it. That's the entire strategy, and it beats almost everything else. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But Miko, what about crypto? What about meme stocks? What about getting in early on the next big thing? And look, I'm not going to tell you that you can never make money on speculative investments. Some people absolutely do. But here's what the data shows. For every person who makes life-changing money on crypto or meme stocks, there are 50 people who lose everything. Speculative investing isn't investing, it's gambling, and the house always wins eventually. If you want to gamble with 5% of your portfolio, fine, have fun. But the core of your wealth building should be boring, predictable, and systematic. Index funds, consistent contributions, decades of compound growth. Here's another psychological shift that's absolutely critical. Most people treat saving and investing like it's optional, like it's something they'll do when they have extra money, or when they get a raise, or when life calms down. But life never calms down. There's always an expense, always a reason to delay. The people who actually build wealth treat saving and investing like a non-negotiable bill. Just like you pay your rent every month without question, you invest every month without question. It's not a decision you make based on how you feel or what's happening that month, it's automatic. And this is why automation is so powerful. When your investment contribution happens automatically the day your paycheck hits, you can't talk yourself out of it. You can't rationalize why you should skip this month. The decision has already been made, and the system executes it without you having to do anything. Let me give you a practical framework for setting this up. First, open a high-yield savings account for your emergency fund. You want this separate from your checking account so you're not tempted to spend it, but accessible enough that you can get to it in an emergency. Aim to build up at least $1,000 as fast as possible, then work towards 3 to 6 months of expenses.
Second, open an investment account. I recommend starting with a Roth IRA if you're eligible because it's tax advantaged. You can contribute up to $7,000 per year and it grows tax-free. If you're already maxing that out or make too much to contribute, open a regular brokerage account. Third, set up automatic transfers. The day your paycheck hits, have a set amount go to your emergency fund until it's fully funded, then redirect that to investments. Start with whatever you can afford, even if it's just $50 or $100 a month. The amount matters less than building the habit. Fourth, invest that money in a low-cost index fund. I'm not giving specific investment advice because everyone's situation is different, but something that tracks the total stock market or the S&P 500 is a solid foundation for most people. And then here's the hardest part. Do nothing. Just let it sit there. Don't check it every day. Don't panic when the market drops. Don't get greedy when it's rising. Just let compound interest do its thing over decades. Now, here's something most people don't think about until it's too late. The biggest wealth destroyer for most people isn't bad investments or market crashes, it's lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation is when your spending increases as your income increases. You get a raise, so you upgrade your apartment. You get a bonus, so you buy a nicer car. You get promoted, so you start eating out more. And suddenly, even though you're making way more money than you did 5 years ago, you're not actually any wealthier. The antidote to lifestyle inflation is simple, but requires serious discipline. When you get a raise, pretend you didn't. Immediately increase your automated savings by the amount of the raise. If you get a $5,000 raise, that's about $400 more per month after taxes. Automate that $400 straight to investments before you ever see it. This is how people making $60,000 build more wealth than people making $150,000. It's not about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep and grow. Here's the thing that nobody wants to hear, but everyone needs to understand. Building wealth is boring. There's no shortcut, there's no secret strategy, there's no hack that lets you skip the decades of compound growth. It's just consistent, automated, systematic investing over a really long time. But here's what makes it worth it. While your money is compounding in the background, you're not grinding. You're not working 80-hour weeks. You're not sacrificing your relationships or your health or your mental well-being. You're living your life. And 20, 30, 40 years from now, you wake up and realize you're financially independent without ever having burned yourself out in the process. That's real wealth. Not just having money, but having money without having destroyed yourself to get it. So here's what I want you to do after watching this video. First, calculate 10 to 15% of your take-home pay. That's your target for automated savings and investing. Second, set up the accounts you need if you don't already have them. Emergency fund savings account, investment account, whatever you need. Third, set up automatic transfers. Make it happen without you having to think about it. And fourth, live your life. Focus on the things that actually matter while your money works for you in the background. Stop grinding, start building systems. Your future self will thank you for having the discipline to do this the boring, sustainable way instead of burning out chasing the next get-rich-quick scheme. If this shifted your perspective on what's actually possible, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content on building wealth without sacrificing your life. I'll see you in the next one.